Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, your resource for all things business, brand, and leadership. We are excited you have decided to join us today.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Elevate Podcast. I'm Robert Kalin.
Mike Newman here with you, and our special guest today is Mike Brennan.
That's right. So Mike Brennan, he's the author of Make Fun a Habit, which is the creative playbook for making life and work fun again. Mike has expertise that goes beyond the pages of these books, or his book here, and has helped clients like Heineken, Chase Bank, really infuse creativity and innovation and fun into their work. And Mike, it is an honor and a privilege to have you on the Elevate Podcast today. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much. And the pleasure's all mine.
Yeah. So Mike and I got connected at a conference from a mutual friend Terry Weaver had down in Orlando, Florida, called The Thing. And I had the privilege of hearing you do your signature talk on this. And what I picked away from that, or what I pulled away from that, is there's something really important about the story behind making fun a habit that I kind of wanted to get the backstory, like why this book, and yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So it's funny because I wasn't intentionally setting out to do this book. I have a tendency to have a lot of different projects kind of in the queue. And this was one that came about actually after another conference, The Thing, that was in Nashville last year. And I was sitting around the table with Terry and we were talking about things, and this kind of got brought up. And, I was somebody who was like, I've done self-published books before. They've been mostly illustrated. And so this thought of like doing a quote real book, right, was a little more daunting. But I thought to myself, do I have enough to say about this? And certainly this is something that I'm exploring in my own life. But how can I do this in such a way that will really speak to a wide variety of people? Because I think the topic of fun, like I've never met someone who's like, you know what, I'm good on fun. Like I have enough. I filled my quota, right? Like everyone's like, yeah, like give me more. Sure. You know? And so talking about it in such a way that it's accessible for people. So the backstory really is, through that conversation and through my own examining my experiences, my life, going, even being a creative person, there are a lot of things that you have to do because you're also an entrepreneur. You're doing things that are tasks that are boring, mundane, things that maybe you're not at a level yet where you can kind of farm those out and have somebody else do them, and stuff just needs to get done. And so I was dealing with a lot of those kind of things and realizing like somewhere along the way, fun kind of up and left the building. And even with the creative things that I was doing, there was a sense of like struggle in some of the things. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, where did the fun go? Because I remember when engaging with these activities, engaging with this idea of coming up with concepts and executing them and doing all these things, it was fun in a way that made me want to do more of it, right? And so that was kind of the point at which I started asking myself these questions of like, what would it look like for fun to come back? Like, what if this was fun? And sometimes it's, what if this was fun again? Because a lot of times, even as entrepreneurs or people who have own businesses, you do things because it has a connection to you. It has a connection to your past at some point, and there's a reason why. And in the doing, in the execution, sometimes that reason can get lost or trampled on, and it simply becomes another job. It simply becomes work that you're doing. And that why isn't front and center. And so for me, fun was a way of bringing this back and asking the question of like, what if fun wasn't just the reward at the end of the process, but what if fun was actually part of the process? And I think that's a very different approach, and one that allows you access so that you start getting more enjoyment out of what it is that you're doing. And if you're enjoying it, you're certainly going to thrive more, and so are the people around you and your business as well.
That's so good. And Mike, I feel like maybe you're a relational expert as well, because what I kept thinking about is, when you're married for a certain period of time, it's the same problem. Fun seems to kind of go out unless you're intentional with it, right? And so how do you bring back that fun? How do you date your spouse again? How do you how do you bring back that vision of your business and go, look, this needs to be fun. It needs to be part of that process. And so, again, you said making fun a habit. How do we make fun a habit? What does that look like for us?
Yeah, I think the first place is awareness and recognition, right? And so it's going, okay, I have a fun deficiency here. And this is something I want to pursue. I want to have better experience. I want to experience more fun. And so starting where you're at and then going, like, I always talk about starting small, because so many people want to think, well, for me to have fun or for me to do something creative, it needs to be this big thing. It needs to be a big budget. It needs to be big blocks of time, big, big, big. And I'm like, no, actually, it's the opposite. It needs to be small. It needs to be accessible. Because what happens is, especially when you're starting to form a habit, you need to be able to get into something and do it, repetitiously, right? Continuously, so that you can build that habit, so that momentum starts to take over and then change from momentum. And so if you really want to see these things take root in your life, start with small opportunities. And sometimes small opportunities look like things that would be silly for us, right? And that's not the kind of fun necessarily that I'm highlighting, by the way. I'm not talking about like putting clown noses on and throwing confetti. I mean, if that's your idea of fun, cool, go for it. But what I am saying is, starting small in the way of, if you're doing something that's a repetitive task, something that doesn't require maybe a lot of brain space, but you have to still do this thing. It could be something as simple as putting on a playlist that lifts your mood, that all of a sudden you're starting to dance around a little bit, like doing some funky moves or something, right? That may seem silly and it may seem frivolous, but the thing is that gives you a place to start to practice this. And I think that's really important. Then you start to look for other ways to introduce this. I talk about one of the things in the book of like, take the long way home. What happens if we stop being so concerned about efficiency of point A to point B, that we actually give ourselves a place to be curious, to meander, right? Yeah. And discover things that we would never discover otherwise because we're so efficient. And sometimes it's allowing that space and that room to wander where we can find things that can be a complete game changer. For me in the book, I was talking about an actual route that I would take from home going someplace. And it was going down this block that I was like, I know this block is there, but I don't really know what's down there. And let's see what happens. And I went down there and there was this amazing park that was right in my neighborhood that I had no idea was there. And the thing was, once I knew it was there and I knew what it was all about, I could actually return there on purpose. Mm-hmm. And so I think setting ourselves up with these opportunities to chase curiosity, to be open to these possibilities, that's what makes things even more fun, because it's what if, what can this look like?
Mike, on what experience suddenly gave you this? Maybe it was something you're doing to work, I don't know, but how did you say, I got to find fun again?
Yeah. Well, I think because it's a core value of mine, first off.
Okay.
I like to hang out and have fun with people. I like to laugh. It's important for me to enjoy what it is that I'm doing. And so for me, when I started feeling like I wasn't enjoying some things and fun wasn't there, it almost felt like a violation against myself, right? Because it was like, ooh, this is crossing a boundary for me in personal values that I don't want to have this experience. And so that started the questioning, that started the processing of going, well, what did happen? How can I get this back? Can I get this back? What would that look like? And then I start to form, okay, here's a pathway forward. Here's how to actually put this into an actionable step plan, so that it's not just simply inspiration, but then it's inspiration with application.
Good.
That's good.
I see a lot of people in the work that I do that aren't having any fun anymore. And, at one time they must have. And so in your discovery of things, what are some of the fun robbers that you've come across that maybe you can pull out and highlight for some of our listeners?
Yeah, I think it's deferment, right? Like, fun is the reward at the end, like I was referring to earlier, where when I retire, then I'll take that trip. Then I'll do that thing. Then I'll follow the passion that I really have. But right now I'm kind of stuck in this thing to finishing the goal that into retirement, right? And the problem is with a lot of that is I know a lot of people who either don't make it there or they make it there and there's really not a whole lot left in the tank. And so I'm like, what if we started to engage with that earlier and figured out how to access that and make that part of our life earlier. So not thinking it in terms of deferment, but thinking about it in terms of part of your process and your habit of every single day being open to those things, right? I think another thing is that people think fun is frivolous and maybe, just not distinguished, right? Or, whatever terminology you want to use around it. Some people grew up, they were like adults when they were kids even, right? Like they had responsibilities, they had, it was like undignified to do certain things. And so I think for them and for everyone really, it's a matter of identifying like, what does your fun look like? Like, don't give yourself an out saying, well, this isn't for me because I work in this industry or because I'm wired this particular way with my personality or experiences. Look for what does fun mean for me personally and start to put into place ways that you can access that on a more regular basis. And so that may look different for all three of us, right? And that's okay, but just be intentional about it and know what that is and don't cop out and say, this is for somebody else.
That's good. Yeah. We all need a little more fun in our lives. A little more laughter, a little more, life, especially as you become an adult, I feel like life can get, it can beat you down, especially if you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to do it all on your own. And, what you're hearing is, oh, you work too much. You're doing too much. How can you do so much? Like, is that idea even going to happen? Is it going to work? And so there's a lot of negativity that kind of comes along with being an entrepreneur and a business owner, and being intentional with it. You're exactly right that we need to figure out what it means for us and then start doing some of that. Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because, even in the headlines and outside of work life, right, we're still being bombarded with this heaviness, with this sense, we've come out of a pandemic, like we're still trying to figure out things kind of got turned upside down, like all these things. And I'm like, that all strips away at this sense of play and fun because everything is so serious, everything's so dire. And, I'm not saying shirk responsibilities. I'm not saying bury your head in the sand, but I am saying be open to positivity and curiosity and hope and fun, because those things lead to a better experience and a better life.
And I love that you're leading people there with your book, because if all of us led by your example, maybe we could bring some fun into the meetings and lift the people that are around us a little bit. Right? I love that. Mike, you look like you were going to say something.
So what have you found as you've worked with some companies, Mike? What have you found have been maybe some of the resistance and some of the acceptance that happens when you come in with this idea of fun? Because some people believe work should be work, and that's why it's called work, and it's not called fun. Because if it was called fun, then we wouldn't pay you for it. So what are some of the things that you've discovered as you've gone in that maybe are barriers that people have to it that we could that listeners could identify with? And then what are some of the ways you've overcome some of those barriers to help them get some fun back in the workplace?
Sure. Yeah. And it's true because what you say in terms of people thinking like, well, work is work, right? I think those statements are usually made intended to get people to be more productive, right? Intended to make the work experience better, more efficient, all those things, productive. Like those are good things in and of themselves. But what happens is I think we get a little too heavy-handed with that statement. And really what I'm talking about again with fun is enjoying what you're doing.
Right.
And I don't know anyone who would say, you know what, I don't want the people in my company enjoying what they're doing. I don't want them showing up as the best versions of themselves. I don't want them engaged. I don't want them collaborating. Like that would be foolish, right? And so some of it is an education piece, right? Because fun as a word by itself, people attach different meanings and experiences to. And so it takes some conversation around that to say, this is what this looks like. And specifically in the workplace, we're not talking about just having pizza parties and foosball tables and everything, again, confetti flying everywhere. There may be some experiences where you need to do some of that stuff for like team building and to give people a place to kind of just chill. But I'm also talking about like, how does this impact the ideas that we come up with, the solutions that we arrive at? Because again, if we're engaged, if we're curious, if we have a place to play and experiment and break some things that are outside like, ooh, this budget and this client and this constraints, then we have a place where we can be more free to actually have innovation. And again, I don't know anybody who says they don't want innovation, right? Everybody champions that, but very few people really know how to actually put something in place so that they're doing that with intention. They're hoping it just becomes a byproduct of whatever it is that they're doing with the processes they may already have. So it's having some of those conversations. You know, I was actually doing a training with some educators. And, you know, you're thinking, okay, these people are working with children. Obviously, they need to have some semblance of fun because the kids, they engage better when there's a sense of fun and the materials presented in a way that's accessible for them. But even they struggled with this fact of like, I have all these things I have to do. I have all these responsibilities that are weighing on me, and getting creative and having the fun seems like it's another thing to add to my do list. And it's already crippling. And I'm like, okay, let's just call a timeout on that and say, like, if we started to build in these small areas where we started to say, let's have some brainstorming activities, right? And so I led them through this exercise where it was coming up with a couple of lists of things and kind of cross-referencing. And I did it with something that was silly and kind of just not really attached to anything real world for them. So it took the pressure off and just got some creative juices flowing. And once that happened, they realized like, oh, there's a lot of things that are right within us that if given the opportunity are going to rise to the surface. Plus, we're in a group of people who are wired differently. And my coworkers may have the opportunity to speak something, an idea, or take an idea to a next level that wouldn't happen if we didn't have this meeting in this way of just free and brainstorming and play and fun. And so it's underscoring the value of that for them personally, but then also professionally as the organization. Like everybody wins when people are enjoying what they're doing, showing up, being engaged, bringing the best versions of themselves.
So this is great. You know, we just did an episode about shifting culture. And this comes right into that, right? Like making fun of habit again is like shifting culture. And you shared something from the stage. You did this whole thing about bubbles, made it super fun, shared the story about the bubble popper. And like, how do we shift culture when there's bubble poppers around? How do we make fun of habit when there are bubble poppers?
Yeah, I think it's acknowledging their concerns. Because honestly, most of the time, bubble poppers are coming from a place that is well-intentioned, right? They're just maybe more cautious. They're maybe a little more attuned to rules and regulations and a process and maybe risk averse. And this, what you may be suggesting, seems like it's going to attack what has been set up. And so I think it's engaging in such a way that acknowledges the benefits of some of those things, but then also builds on that to say, look, at one time, somebody had a great idea, and that great idea turned into the things that you're trying to protect right now and the concerns that you're bringing about. And what I'm saying is, if we have room for more growth, if we have room for new ideas, we need a place to be able to do that and welcome these voices, even the voices who are the bubble poppers, into the conversation. But there's also a caveat to that. Well, I will say, if you're in a brainstorming meeting where it's kind of like blue sky, just there's no wrong answer, you're writing things down, you want to warn against any bubble popping in that scenario, because you're trying to get to as many ideas as possible and you don't say no to anything. And then when it comes for the time for refinement, that's when you need some bubble poppers who bring in, well, did you think about this? Or here's a real world solution that maybe you didn't think about with how this is going to be affected. That's when you start to get some more data and research on how is this practically going to get carried out? We need that, right? We don't want to just be like willy-nilly and go like, yeah, we're just having fun. We're out here just being creative and whatever. You don't want to be so clever with things that you confuse people, right? That's something in creativity that's underscored again and again a lot of times. And so I think it's, you know, again, acknowledge those people, value them, make them feel heard and understood, but engage in conversation. Don't come at it where it's like, you're on one side, I'm on the other side. And, you know, there's so many times we just want to cut to the chase that we end up sacrificing relationship and conversation for the sake of putting our agendas first.
That's good. So, Mike, how can people get the book? How can people find you?
Yeah. So if they go to makefunahabit.com, you can order the book straight there from me. I'll do a signed copy, or it's available on Amazon as well. And there's also some resources that are free on the page for Make Fun a Habit, which are like a Spotify playlist that I consider some fun music, right? May not be your taste, but hey, give it a chance. And there's also a download page that's kind of a coloring page. You know, if some people are into some coloring and just kind of de-stressing that way. And also a thing that I call Fun Libs, which is kind of a Mad Libs type thing, fill in the blank kind of game thing. Basically, just some resources that are designed to engage people at different levels and different experiences. Awesome. And of course, you can go to mikebrennan.me, which is my main site, and find all the things, all the books, and all the services and things that I offer.
That's awesome. Cool. And so if you could leave people with one final thought, what would it be?
I would say take the time to ask yourself the question, what does fun look like for me? Because it's not going to be answered by anybody else. And it's not going to magically show up. And most of the time when we're having fun, we're not thinking about it, we're experiencing it. Yeah. And so if we're not really thinking about it, we don't really identify what it looks like for us, and it's harder to replicate. It's harder to do with intention. And so I think even if that looks like pausing in a moment, recognizing, being aware, hey, you know what, like this is actually really fun. There's something about this activity that I'm engaged in that is a fun thing for me. Why? What makes this fun? And maybe that shows up in other areas that then again, you can engage with and learn new things, grow, you know, as a person and, you know, professionally and even in hobbies and things, you know.
I love it. Awesome. Well, I thought it would be fun to share because I took notes of your presentation when I was at the thing. Nice. I pulled this out. I'm going to quote you. It says, "Find the fun. Don't wait for it to arrive. Make it. Find it. Do it." I want to leave that with you guys today as you go about your week. Find the fun. Pick up Make Fun a Habit from Mike Brennan. We'll put the link in the description for you to make it easy. But go have fun. Until then, we'll see you next week. Take care. God bless.
All right. Take care, everybody. Thanks, Mike, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Our hope is this episode has been helpful for you today. If it's impacted you in some way, we encourage you to share it with someone. To receive a direct notification of our next episode, click the follow button on your favorite app or platform. You can also watch each episode on YouTube. The links are in the description. If you want to connect with us on a deeper level, go to countercultureleadership.com/resources. We'll see you next week on the Elevate Podcast.